Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at a few different projects by who I consider one of our greatest, if not the greatest, living cartoonist of our time, Roman Muradov. I'm a huge fan of Roman. I kind of obsessively follow his Substack and try and get as many of his books as I can get my hand on. He has a good back catalog. I've done like an artist review at some point that reviewed a number of his projects all at once, and now he's got a number of new books out. So I'm just gonna go through them all, different little projects. When I ordered these, I got really blessed, and Roman sent along just a sketch of his main character in the Fogghorn series here, and then on this one here, he had accidentally sent me a copy of a book I already had. It wasn't the one I ordered, and so when he sent me the other one, he gave me a terrible father drawing, original drawing, as an apology. So thank you so much, Roman. That's awesome. Like I said, I consider Roman one of, if not the greatest cartoonist of our time. So it's pretty cool to have like two little pieces of original art, especially to have a terrible father drawing, because terrible father's a pretty funny character. So let's take a look at Terrible Father first. Terrible Father is just like this character that Roman came up with as, I think, a one-off joke, and then it was popular, or he liked it or whatever, and it stuck. And so now he's done more of them, enough to collect into a book, and it seems like maybe there will be another one. I hope so. So these are all really short stories just about a guy being a terrible father. They're just pretty funny. This first one here is the son says, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay," and the dad whacks him on the head with a spoon. "No, you're not. I'm gay. That's right. Applaud your gay father." So that's what it is. It's just a guy being a terrible dad. I love Muradov's style. He's able to make a drawing that both looks like super professional, well designed, well planned, but also like a kid drew it and drew it in 5 minutes. I don't know how you do that. That's a skill that I really admire and want to work on myself. How to have a drawing look so fresh and like it just came out of the pen so quickly, but is so well designed and all of that. There's a really fun little visual trick in this panel here that Muradov does a lot, because he's always working with like spot colors, like two colors, and oftentimes those things interrelate. But here you have like the terrible father turning his head, and he's able to actually show time in the panel in a different way, because he can do the lettering in a color as well. And I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone do that, where I've seen people do like two moments like this, but I'm not sure I've seen it separated out by color, where the second moment has its word balloon also in a different color, so you can tell that these are happening at different times in the same panel. So I really enjoy that as a strategy. Just another one I thought was funny, 1-800-TERRIBLE ADVICE. I struggle to be on time for anything. Any advice how to fix this? There's nothing for you to fix. Just tell people you're on your own time zone and adjust it accordingly. Then accuse them of being late. Just like really awful advice like that. So I quite enjoy this character. Like I said, I really enjoy Muradov's design sensibility and just the finish of his work as well. Then there's this pamphlet he sent along, Resist 25. This is a bunch of cartoons about Trump and Elon Musk that were produced kind of at the beginning of the year. I really like the way they've been organized, like in this collage style, in this pamphlet handout, with all these other things just kind of stuck in here to make the look of it richer. And I think one of my favorite things throughout this is there's a number of drawings of the Cybertruck in here, and Muradov's Cybertrucks crack me up. It's just like a box with a bunch of mirrors that Elon's looking at himself in. They're always like this awful little box that they are, burning on ketamine. So some really funny stuff in there. And again, he's using that two color spot color thing to like make annotations and have characters say other things, and that really allows him to kind of layer the jokes on top of one another in a way that I'm not sure I've seen. But I'm also not like the guy that's following a ton of political cartoons, so maybe someone else has done that, but it seems fresh to me. Then these two books, these are part of an ongoing series called Fogghorn that Muradov's releasing on his Substack. So if you want to get it as it's coming out, go subscribe to his Substack. And then also on the Substack, once a certain volume's done, then he'll announce, hey, you can buy these. So buying these as they come out. I imagine this will all be collected in a graphic novel someday, I would hope, but just in case, I'm buying as they come out because this is some of my favorite stuff going on right now. So I'm going to dig into these a little bit deeper. This is showing the more story-driven side of Muradov's practice. It's not just the funny joke cartooning. He's also a really spectacular and sophisticated writer of comics as literature. I think Roman is a very literature-minded person. I think you'll see in this series too, he's someone that's very invested in high culture, even though this is kind of like suggests lowbrow in some of these things. I think, he's very much like a New Yorker cartoonist, someone who lives in metropolitan areas, reads a lot of literature. That comes across in his work. And some points it's a little bit like, and I'll point him out where it's like that's all he knows maybe. And so there is, for people who don't live in those environments, the concerns of the characters in these books seem a little superficial, but that's also like he's satirizing these characters. But it seems like what he's familiar with to satirize. And then but the writing throughout is really good as well. So this is some of the best like literature and comics type of stuff I can think about. And then it comes with great cartooning on every level, not just in the art, but in the writing and the layout. And by cartooning, I mean the ability to communicate something really succinctly, unlike me and how I ramble on in these videos. And you can see that just in a lot of the images here. There's a lot of really great cartooning of motion, that the phone coming across here, taking the glasses off, whacking the phone down. Just a lot of really great decisions in terms of the image making. Very simple images, but they look, like I said earlier, super well composed and sophisticated. That's the second coloring, the way they just take what could have been just a character and really quickly with one big shape kind of suggest a whole space and a whole room. I think that's all really great. So story-wise, we're being introduced here to Irma. Irma is a wannabe writer who's having a hard time getting past her first sentence. I really like that as well, showing in the captions here. Like the first is, "My bed sheets bore the imprint of years of rejection," and then by the time we get to here, her linen bore imprints of rejection, and you see all the edits piling up in there. I think that's really fun. As Irma goes downstairs here, we get some really, really great sophisticated cartooning where Muradov is obviously referencing Duchamp's nude on a staircase. I think that's one of the cool things about Muradov's art. And that's what I mean by sophisticated, is you see a lot of like high art, fine art, museum art, high literature influences in the work. I see a lot of Matisse and things like that. So I'm always excited when things are coming from outside the lineage of cartooning and comics specifically, and referring to other arts as well. And I see a lot of that in Roman's work. Here we get introduced to Irma's friend and kind of friend. She's saying here, we're not exactly friends, but like a roommate next door that she hangs out a lot with. So we're not exactly friends, more like hostages who have grown to tolerate each other over time. Repeated exposure has worn down our social boundaries and turned our daily interaction to what passes to an untrained eye for friendship. So some of the interesting just like character observations that I think are really well written. And Clovis here has invited Irma to go to an event at a bookstore. They're going to be filming a movie at this bookstore, and so that's kind of one of the big plot points. Another major plot point is Irma's involved in this like bookstore / writing club called the Hive. This is the local author Audra Gersh, who's of moderate renown and the founder of the Hive. And there's a lot of wannabe writers that are really big fans of Irma's work, or trying to suck up to her and involved in the Hive, trying to further their career. And Irma's, one of these people that's going after Audra to try and get to know her better. And you see that in this scene. The bookstore that we're going to film at is called the Dog's Ear Books. And when Irma gets there, she realizes that what's being filmed is a porno, not just a movie. This is also a bookstore that Irma used to work at. So she's there with Clovis and realizing, oh my God, going to be filming a porno. I don't want to do this. So she just goes like upstairs into the back to talk to her old boss as the porn is going on. I think this scene really shows the best Muradov's strength as a writer and his ability to cartoon as a writer, to communicate a whole lot in a very little. So Irma's talking to the owner of the bookstore, Claudia, and is saying like, what's going on? Why you have a porno being filmed downstairs? And I'm just going to read this and kind of show how much is packed into this like little page and a half here or whatnot. So Claudia says, it's not pleasant, but it pays the rent. Next Saturday, I'm renting the place out to some horrific shits in corsets. And Tuesdays are booked up for something they call body storytelling. Can't be picky these days. The whole idea of a bookstore is so unnecessary and archaic. It might as well be considered a fetish. And I really, really like that little bit. It unpacks like the whole history of this character and why they have this bookstore. They're a fetishist and obsessive over books. It's so true about books. Like at this point, I don't know, me and Tori buy all these books and we have these nice, editions of books that we could just get in a floppy cover. Then the story's the same no matter what, but we're buying like a $75 hardcover because it's all pretty. And it's like damning on me as a book collector. It is fetishistic. And so to be able to tie that to like, hey, who am I to judge people for their fetishes? I've got mine. And, like we're all in a culture of whores anyways. So I got to do what I can to survive. I'm going to sell my bookstore. There's just so much packed into that one little page in those, 7-8 sentences that tells so much about that character, about society. I think it's really impressive writing and something I aspire to in writing as much as I aspire to the directness that Muradov shows in the art. I look forward to being able to try and write that succinct. My only complaint about this story, and this is just a personal taste thing, is it is a story about like a stuck creative. I tend to hesitate a little bit at stories by artists and authors, about artists and authors, because it veers a little too close to like autobiography, or like this person is in a world where all they deal with is other artists and authors. Like all the characters in here are aspiring writers or creatives. They're all like hipsters in a major metropolitan area. So there seems to be a pretty like bubble limited view of the world, even though it's in a very adult kind of approach to satire on the bubble that Muradov seems to be in. It does seem, and this applies to a lot of his other projects as well. They all seem to be involved in like pretty highbrow culture in large metropolitan areas with creative artists, writers, gallerists, critics, stuff like that. So for like, I think these books may have a hard time landing for people who chafe at that. Like they want something that's more applicable to the average person. So that's my only criticism of it. And it shows up in the writing at the end where it falls into the kind of mistakes that a lot of autobiographers make, with this one little bit of dialogue. I'm living a shit metaphor, unfit for print, embarrassing and useless. And I'm always a little disappointed when a story that's a really good story, really well drawn, even if it's not, I'm always disappointed when the story itself is pointing out that it's kind of unfit for print, like in the author's mind or the character's mind. That to me undermines my experience with it in a way. Like, if you don't even believe in this, if you don't believe in the idea of, just complaining about being stuck as an artist, then don't do it on the page. So that's just a taste thing. It's not a condemnation of the quality of this. It's just like a genre of writing I'm not a big fan of. And I think it's a mistake a lot of creatives fall into, because they've only ever been creatives and they haven't lived much life outside of that. And so even though there's a lot of depth in what they're saying about this field, it seems like a pretty narrow, shallow view of life in general. Into issue 2 now, a brick wall. The first one's called The Uncorrected Proof. We get a look at more of these creatives. And again, Muradov does a really good job fleshing out these characters. So it's saying Audra's the undisputed queen of the Hive. Then there's these other characters. We have Adonia Waverly, the second in command, the resident spiritualist and the practitioner of something that she calls all faith. Like, of course, Muradov's definitely run into characters like that. They're all over the place in the creative field. Next up is Tuesday Stein, a professional opinion haver who has become the basis of the sharpness of her bangs, the arbiter of truth on any given subject, and just kind of breaking down these characters. So really fleshing out the environment of this place, the Hive. Another character documented her decline in 14 memoirs, all of them badly written but important. I like that bit of criticism as well. I think there's a ton of books over the last 10, 15 years that have been sold as good books, award-winning books, stuff like that. When I read them, a lot of comics, especially autobiography, especially when it's something like, the coming of age story of an LGBTQ or an immigrant or someone who went through a war, like anything that's in the lineage of Mouse or Stuck Rubber Baby or something like that gets lifted up because those stories are important, but a lot of them aren't good, and it's really frustrating that we can't seem to separate those two things out. Like, you can tell an important story, but do it poorly, and like, I don't feel like we should be awarding things just because they're important, even though they're done poorly. So it was really nice to see Muradov acknowledge that, like, you can have a lot of important memoirs that about terrible things in life. That doesn't make it a good book. Some lovely composition in these books. You can tell that they're not as quick. They're not like in The Terrible Father, where it looks like he did it in 5 minutes. The surface approach is still looks really rough and quick, but there seems to be more compositional planning and things like that in some of the images. So that combination of the really quick, rough cartooning style with the more composed, more details in the backgrounds and stuff, I just absolutely love that. Don't be surprised if you see me trying to rip that off and integrate that into my style somehow. And we get introduced to Boris Yates. He's the producer of the porn that was being shot at the bookshop, and he's been reaching out to Irma and kind of offering her a position in his company. And she's, balking at this idea of participating in doing porn, showing a lot of the different things money-making schemes he's tried over his life. So a pretty big cast of characters within 2 books that's being fleshed out. I don't know how many of these there are going to be, but it seems like a pretty large, rich story that has a lot to go. It doesn't look like this is going to conclude within a book or 2, I don't think. I had to crack up at this panel. Clovis has taken apart. This is going back to when Irma first moved into the house that she was in and first meets Clovis. She leaves and he takes her bed frame apart to build her a bookshelf. And she comes back and is like, "What the hell, man? Like, you took my whole bed apart." And he's like, oh yeah, right. I'll bring the mattress back up. And Irma says, I don't want to sleep on the floor. I'm not a man, I had to crack up. That's, one of the earliest interactions Tori and I had before we started dating is someone in the peer group that I was talking to someone about having my bed on the floor, talking to another guy around my age who just recently got divorced. And we were talking about mattress on the floor life and how great it was and all of that. And someone else looked at Tori and was like, would you ever date a guy with a mattress on the floor? And like, obviously we both knew there was an interest already there. So it was a really funny, awkward moment. And she was like, oh no, I would never. And then a couple weeks later we're dating, and took her a few months to finally get me to get a bed frame. So I had to laugh at that it's like, I'm not a man, but I've known so many guys who are like that. And I've known so many women who balk at the idea. I don't get it. I like the bed on the floor. It feels more natural to me. I don't like sleeping off the floor, but whatever. We have a bed frame now at work. So there's some interesting life advice in this last little scene here, where Clovis is talking to Irma, and Irma's asking about Clovis says he's a conceptual plumber, and she's like, what the hell does that mean? And he's explaining look, I'm trying to get really rich clientele, so I try and make it like this conceptual performance thing for them while I'm doing their plumbing, because that's what I do to make my money. And he's saying, in turn, it secures my niche as a plumber for the discerning clientele. I've found this niche. You got to take what you have and make something of it. And Irma, that's kind of what they're talking about. And Irma says, smart. And then Clovis says, you have to bend the coat racks of the place you inhabit to keep your coat hanging. You can't just ignore whatever's growing in your moldy teacup while cuddling your comfort cabbage. And so he's telling her, like, look, you got to make do with what you have in your surroundings. You got to bend the coat rack. You got to take what you have and make it work. You can't just sit around and not clean your dishes and cuddle a cabbage and hope for things to happen. And that's kind of talking to her about the writing too. You can't just sit there and rewrite that same first sentence over and over. Eventually you got to take what you have and make it work for you. So just another really interesting bit of writing that happens, like obviously there's a conversation there, but mostly it's happening in a couple sentences. And that succinctness in writing, being able to cartoon with your dialogue as well as the actual imagery, is one of the things I keep coming back to. And then you can just see the beauty of the compositions, the color choices, all that stuff. I really like even just this design thing at the front where it's like, here's the color palette for the book, I think, put out. A lot of really interesting choices. So huge fan of Roman Muradov's stuff. I think everyone should check it out and see what it can teach them about cartooning. Again, thank you so much for the originals, Roman, and really, if you see this, I really enjoy your work. You're a huge inspiration. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really, really beautiful, and has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.